Hey, it's me again. I'm just going to talk about a few things I know. About the strangeness of this system, this matrix. And the basic truth of it, which is that everything we see is a byproduct of the marriage of force and form. And on some level, some force moved. And because it moved, it was naturally met with resistance. You think a force needs an intermediary to carry itself through. So on some level, matter, in a form that we don't understand it because it's bereft of time, holding a state of non-duality, non-polarity, non-vibration, in a state of perfect stillness, perfect rest. A force penetrates it. And because this vibration, there's this intermediary, vibration can only move through a liquid mediary. It requires a resonance, a pattern of resonance to carry the waves by. They need to be coherent. It needs to be coherently moving, flowing matter to produce or carry waves. So space is like this higher tier vibration of water. The ancients called it Absu. And on some level, there is this event where something is moving. There's a force, and it's moving. And because it's moving, it's naturally meeting a resistance. And by meeting that resistance, it is technically impacting a form. It's pushing back on it. So you have this primordial state where there is a vibration and a resistance to it. And that event is what gave birth to an entire reality. It's a massive sine wave pattern, a toroidal field. It's matter moving, but because it's restricted, it's slowed. And because it's slowed, the friction gives it heat, life, but then also decay and death. For something to take on heat, it's subject to thermodynamic laws where the heat will eventually decay if it's not continually fed. So we live in a zone of creation where the surrounding magnetic fields of the neighboring galaxies produced very subtle fields of energy, intersecting energies, where the right conditions were produced for matter to take very specific shapes here in our matrix, in our solar matrix. But what's interesting is, and I drew diagrams to show all this stuff, but when you have a force impacting form, and it's like the ancients knew, and the Greeks also, and and the Asclepius, I think it's what it's called. You have the caduceus, which is the two serpents winding up, and and everyone knows what that is. It's technically alternating current, but it's alternating current moving up and down the base of the spine. It's what we are. Everything's electricity. So you have this other symbol where it's just a single serpent winding up a pole, but it's not actually a pole. It represents sort of an ecliptic where there is something vibrating, and it's actually a single particle of matter that's vibrating. And if you were to see it in 2 dimensions, it would sort of like look like an EKG sort of. And I know I mentioned this in the other video, but it's important. But the division up and above that line is the 2nd dimension. That's the fracturing of singularity, where when a particle is now in a state of flux, it actually moves sort of above and below an ecliptic, but because of quantum superposition, it remains centered. But then also, with the strange state of matter that it is the basic unit, the basic building block of awareness. So this thing is technically aware. You have a particle that's, you have matter, vibrations introduced to this thing. It begins to vibrate, and because of quantum superposition, it takes all of these different, this sort of non-local position where it is itself and away from itself, but also viewing itself away from itself, and having this sort of surreal experience where it's fractured away from itself and able to have both experiences subjectively. And I hope I'm not losing the majority of, I know this is it's strange, but so you have the 2nd dimension where you have this ecliptic, and due to vibration it passes above and below this ecliptic, and because of its perspective, it has this sort of, as it's locked in time, as a measurement of time, this frequency pattern, it's a measurement of time. That's what sine wave is. It's a measurement of an event, a single event. Something is impacting something. Something's moving. That's an event. And because something is moving, it has a measurable power, a charge to it. It has a point of origin and a point where it's moving to, and that's technically considered an event, and that's something that you can measure in time. That's the basic measurement of time. It's just the measurement of events, the measurement between events, perceived events. So anyway, in 2 dimensions, you have this particle vibrating, taking on the form of both the particle and the wave. It's Aries, the lambda, and the wave, the actual toroidal field, where, in 2 dimensions it looks like an EKG meter, but this matrix has a quantum form. So in 3 dimensions it takes on sort of a toroidal field, a toroidal pattern, like a tornado, a winding serpent. And the ancients referred to these things as serpents of fire, because all of these vortex patterns of energy emanate beginning with Aries, because Aries represents the raw potential of a particle, in a state of rest before it's given motion. As it's given motion, the intent behind it, setting that thing in motion, it takes on a certain arc or an angle. As it winds, it angles, and that angle is because Aries moves into Taurus. You have the arc of the toroidal field that's given to the torsion field by Taurus. That's the force, that the winding bull. It moves with the potency of a bull. It's just this twisting. You know what bulls do when they're pissed? They buck and spin in circles, and what's going to stop them, right? But then what we're looking at when we look at the zodiac is actually a one-dimensional depiction of this energetic play-out of force and form. And when you get into phase angle dynamics, you see how when light, as it's vibrating, its potentials change. As it changes frequencies, its potentials change, its colors change, its mood changes. The way we perceive its mood because of the color changes. The way we perceive mood is based on color, right? But like it goes into the elements, where the elements are just basically a representation of the play out between force impacting a form. What you're looking at are the quadruplicity of the states of matter, the 4 states of matter, giving a playground of possibilities to celestial force basically having sex with celestial form. You have this sort of high level play out of a vibration impacting a womb of potential, a womb where matter is at rest, the ether, where it hasn't taken shape, it's just raw potential, but then impacting it sends it spiraling into time, where it begins to sort of like notice itself as a singularity. It is all aware of its potential, but to become, to experience that potential, it has to see it all play out. So it's interesting, really. You go into the tales of Tiamat and the Apsu and her fire serpent children. We're talking about galaxies. These winding serpents of fiery celestial, and not fire in the sense that we know it, but fire the plasma, fire the state of matter where light is focused, where it's at a critical angle, where it's urged to move, where there is a division of the particles within it, where they're vibrating, and they, like an atom perceives itself to be at a loss of electrons, so it goes in search of new electrons. I think I'm saying that right. And it actually, what stirs atoms or electrons to produce current, it's an incongruence in the masculine and feminine principle in the atom. When Adam goes to seek his equivalent, his Eve, his opposite, to complete himself, he's urged to move. You get current. It's the same principle in physics, and I think I'm veering off, but that's fire. Fire is when you have matter that is urged to move by sort of a process of desire, the desire for completion, because by its own perspective, it sees itself as parted, separate from itself, beginning as a singularity. An atom goes in search of itself by its neighbors because it perceives itself to be missing part of itself. When something is off about its balance of protons and electrons, it's really quite interesting. And we're built of the same physics, which is why the egg, the sperm chases the egg, why lightning bolts will chase the magnetic field, why man will chase woman. It's all built into the photon, all the physics of behavior, the physics of, the states of matter, where, you have, it's fire, it's plasma, that's just supercharged, superheated gas, right? You have gas, which is liquid in a state of it's just sort of not necessarily flowing, but it's less dense than water, so it sort of just takes the space between the firmament, the solid form, and the water, right? It just takes up the space between things, and that's its nature, air. It's the divisive property. It's always there in between, where there's nothing else. It is actually it's primordial subtraction. It scatters, right? Fire is division. Earth, solid. Matter, it stacks. It's addition. And it's just matter in a state where it's given law, structure, rigidity. It's capable of assuming that force, because Earth is a form, so it assumes the force given by either fire or air. And this is a whole other lesson. But fire and air are the forces. Water and earth are the forms. Fire and air are masculine. Water and earth are feminine. It's all the same atoms taking different shape. Which is why God made man in his own image. Man and woman in his own image. Excuse me. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female created he them. There's a deeper mystery there. I think that's enough for now. Is there anything more you want to hear? Because I'm just going to ramble until I can maybe develop a cohesive, like a, not a syllabus, but like an itinerary. Like a draft a list of things I should talk about and make it make sense and not be scatterbrained. Gemini shit. Yeah, so I'll cut it off here. It's 16 minutes and some change. Peace, y'all. Tell me what you think.